Sultan, I think we can start. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This webinar is hosted by ACFE Lebanon and supported by ACFE Jordan and ACFE Egypt as part of the International Fraud Awareness Week that is organized by ACFE Global. My name is Eli Abdessatir. I am a board member and the membership director at ACFE Lebanon. The ACFE offers its member the opportunity for professional certification with the Certified Fraud Examiner credential. The CFE is the most preferred credential around the world that indicates expertise in fraud prevention and detection. We would like to invite you all to learn more about our association by visiting our website, acfelebanon.org, or reaching out on our social media platforms. Today, our speaker, Mr. Soltan Hassanieh, who is also a board member and the Training and Education Director at ACFE Lebanon, will be presenting an interesting topic related to corporate ethics under the title The Bad Apple, the impact of corporate ethics on business. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box and we will be answering them all in person after the webinar is over. Now, without any further delay, Mr. Hassanieh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, from wherever you're watching us. Welcome to my presentation. First of all, let me thank you for taking the time and being with us here on this webinar. As you can see from the title, today's webinar, it's all about bad apples, or in other words, ethics, and specifically in its corporate context. We all often encounter a wide range of potential ethical dilemmas, not all of which are explicitly addressed by the code of conduct of our organizations. And the big question that we're going to find an answer for during this webinar is, how good is a company at detecting and managing the bad apples? Okay. In today's webinar, we'll be together for an hour of time discussing the following sections. In section 1, we will be building an understanding of corporate ethics and its application. Then it's going to be followed up with section 2, where we'll be facing ethical dilemmas. And here I would like to invite everyone on the call to participate with us on what ethical decisions should we take specifically in those given scenarios. In section 3, we will have a deep dive into the Volkswagen emission scandal, one of the biggest corporate scandals that we have ever known, and we shall understand how corporate ethics was a major reason behind it. To end the webinar, we will be discussing solutions in section 4 on how to create corporate resilience against ethical misconduct and creating a culture of integrity in our corporation. Okay. First, let's start with understanding corporate ethics and its application in our everyday work lives. To start this section, I shall ask everyone on the call a couple of questions to build up this understanding. So, when it comes to business ethics, I always wonder and ask myself many questions that I really have no answers for. I know it's year 2021, but still I have no clear answers for why do we still hear of ethical misconducts happening here and there? Haven't corporations yet implemented more and more ethics programs in the past years to stop ethical misconduct? Haven't CEOs and senior management executives highlight to their organizations that integrity is one of the most important corporate values they believe in? Haven't business administration faculties in our universities add business ethics course as a mandatory requirement in their curriculum? Well, the truth is that all the questions that I have just wondered about have been addressed by the concerned parties. But the real question is, are those efforts enough? Or in other words, are we doing enough? The answer is simple. With all the efforts invested by everyone, it seems that it haven't been made, it seems that all the efforts invested by everyone, it seems that they haven't made that much of an impact. And I insist on this idea. Yes, there are a lot of effort, but with not much of results. As we are still hearing of corporate scandals here every now and then. So let's stop for a moment and let's start looking in depth. Why are ethical misconducts turning to be the corporate coronavirus spreading around corporations worldwide? Well, it's because of the efforts are not matching the problem itself. In my opinion, I do believe that additional efforts are needed by CEOs, boards, corporate ethics officers, compliance officers, business ethics professors. And yes, there are many things that can be done right now to combat such a virus. And as a first step, we need to start shifting the way corporations and society view ethics. Since we always hear that people, corporations, and the system itself are all corrupt. And we always try to convince ourselves that it's the opposite. Well, let me tell you, bad apples exist everywhere and at all levels. And to be honest, the efforts for the past 30 years have failed to control and limit corporate scandals. You're gonna ask me, Sultan, aren't we getting better? Well, yes, we are getting better. And especially nowadays with the globalization and the expertise sharing, like attending webinars, conferences, trainings, and even webinars like the one we are all on now here. All those efforts have helped improve the situation and raise the needed awareness on the importance of ethics. But still, a lot more is needed from each one of us when it comes to creating a culture of integrity. To sum it up, everyone has a role to play to stop the bad apple from ruining the whole battle. Okay, switching gears. Here on this slide, I'm gonna talk about the ethics journey. How did we get introduced to the concept of ethics? And how did this concept evolve as we got exposed every day to different scenarios that requires us to make decisions? And not any decision, a decision for standing up for our values or becoming a bad apple. And here I would like to share an interesting quote by the Lebanese American writer, Nassim Nicola Taleb. He is the author of The Black Swan. He once said, if you see fraud and don't say fraud, you are fraud. As simple as it may look, but it's all about deciding on what side do you want to stand with. Do you want to become a bad apple? As simple as this. Back to the ethics journey. Well, it all started in our childhood. As a child, our parents had planted a lot of concepts into our tiny brains. That lying is bad, cheating is not acceptable, stealing is a crime, being disrespectful to others is not tolerated, and many other concepts. They considered all that as unacceptable behavior. We all agreed that those concepts really stuck into each one of us. However, as we grew up and finished our studies and we got ready for the new chapter of our life, we got so excited about, I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. I'm talking about getting a job and starting a career. At first, it may have looked easy for many, but I do believe all of us had been surprised. Surprised of what? Surprised by the number of bad apples they came across when they started their career. Yes, many of us faced a lot of unethical situations and dealt with those bad apples. And they had to make a decision in those scenarios, which is either to become a bad apple or to speak up for what's wrong and what's right. And that's pretty challenging. At this point, we all can come to a conclusion that ethical misconducts often seem questionable and that all the values we have learned are not applicable. It's not what our parents taught us, and it's not what we've learned in business ethics courses back at universities. It's something else and at a different level. It is really difficult to decide, shall I speak up or shall I stay silent? We all have witnessed a lot of unethical situations. I'm talking about situations from sexual harassment to inappropriate treatment by superiors. Now that we've covered that journey, let me practically tell you the following. Nowadays, ethical misconduct is a significant focus by everyone. It is directly correlated to an individual's personal morals, values, and how he or she thinks. And with around 7 billion human beings in the world, ethics for each one of us is for sure a debatable subject. What's wrong for me in Lebanon might be right for X in the United States and might be considered a violation for Z in Japan. So let's take a moment and think about the concept itself and reflect on the people we work with every day. We all grew up in different family environments. We all grew up in different family environments. We all come from different educational backgrounds. We all probably have various religious beliefs, and we likely also come from different generations. Each factor I just have mentioned will definitely shape our personal morals and values, and will definitely play a role in our ethical decision-making process. Moving forward, let's talk about ethics in its corporate form. If you were to visit the website of the largest corporations, what would you expect to see as their corporate value on their websites? So on the website, you can find an About Us tab. If you click on this tab, you shall find a statement by the company as the one you're seeing now on the screen. We at XYZ share a set of core values like we're gonna fill in the blanks. I need everyone here on the call to help me with filling in the blanks. So we at XYZ share a set of core values, which I don't know, which are the base corporate value of all the work we do. And they also say our general business principles, code of conduct, and ethics and compliance manuals will help everyone at XYZ to act in line with those values to comply with the relevant laws and regulations. I think everyone is familiar with such a statement, so I need everyone please on the call to help me with filling those corporate values that we can find in large corporations' websites. We'll give you 1 minute and I'll be reading your participations in the chat box. Can everyone please share with me what kind of corporate values we can find?
We can add integrity.
I'd like everyone to have their contributions within the chat box if possible, please.
Yeah.
Integrity, Khalid shared with us integrity. What other corporate values? We're talking about corporate values that we might find on corporations' websites. We're talking about what exactly?
Confidentiality.
Any idea?
Accountability.
Confidentiality.
Transparency, teamwork.
Transparency.
Equal
Exactly.
opportunity.
True.
Equal opportunity employer.
That's true. That's true.
Ethically.
Objectivity.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Thank you all for your contributions. Let's stop it over here. I think everyone now has an idea about what I'm talking about. We're talking about corporate values like honesty, integrity, loyalty, and others like the ones you can see now on the screen. We're talking teamwork, innovation, diversity, CSR, and many others. To be honest, all those corporate values are really honorable and are really important values. And yes, they are directly linked to the ethical conduct and ethical behaviors. But let's stop here for a second and let's ask ourselves the following question. How can stakeholders, I mean you, me, employees, government, when I say stakeholders, I mean you, me, employees, government, customers, vendors, everyone. How can stakeholders ensure that corporations are executing those stated corporate values in the manner those values represent? What I'm trying to highlight here is the concept of accountability. They say they support honesty, but when you go check their practices, you'll find that it's built on lies and cheating people with fake products. They say they support diversity, but when you go look into their human resource capital, you'll find people of color are not hired. You'll find people of different beliefs are not accepted. So really, to understand the impact of ethics on business, we need to identify methods to mitigate future ethical misconduct. And here it would be very helpful to analyze and understand past corporate scandals and try to understand the root causes. As they say, lessons of the past may teach us actions for the future. So stay tuned with us. In section 3, we have chosen for you a very interesting corporate scandal, which we will dissect together in order to see how corporate ethics played a major role behind the Volkswagen emission scandal. Okay, moving to our next section, ethical dilemmas. I think we all have faced, are facing currently, and we are still gonna face in the future a lot of ethical dilemmas within our everyday life and especially at work. Dilemmas that will make us question things around us and will make us wonder if we're taking the right ethical decision. So in this section, we shall present to you 2 working related ethical dilemmas that you're gonna face right now at work, and you are required to take a decision. So I would like everyone also on the call to share with me his and her answer to the question in the chat box, or if you want on the microphone. Okay, ethical dilemma number 1. Please, I need your attention. Imagine that you are the accounts receivable accountant of a company, and it's the last week of the quarterly reporting period. The chief accountant wants to make sure that the sales department numbers or the sales department sales forecast are met for the end of the quarter. So he asks you to record a couple of unconfirmed sales, knowing that the job orders for those specific sales are not yet confirmed until next week. What should you do? Should you say yes or no? I would like to ask everyone to share with me over the chat if they are gonna go with the chief accountant's instruction and they would record those unconfirmed sales entry. There is no harm. Everyone will be happy. Or no, they wouldn't accept that. And they will say, no, that's not ethical. We will not record unconfirmed sales until they are there. I'd like everyone to share with me over the chat. Is that possible, please?
Not
Yes,
possible.
are you with?
Not possible. The chat is not available for us.
Yeah, chat is not aligned to give option.
Chat is not available? Okay, one
Yes.
second, please. What about now? Okay, let's take someone from the audience. Anyone would like to express his opinion about this ethical dilemma and what would he do in such a case? Someone has raised his hand. Who would like to speak? I think that the
Mazen.
ethical. Okay, Mazen, would you participate? Would you like to share with
Yeah,
us your
sure.
opinion?
Of course not. We shouldn't be recording unconfirmed sales. You know, he should refuse categorically to do that.
So you believe that the chief accountant is asking something that's not ethical, isn't it?
Absolutely, because this is like, you know, cheating on sales. You know, unrecognized sales. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, thank you, Mazen, for your participation. Thank you. Anyone else has a different opinion than Mazen's? I can see.
Karen?
I can see Karen. Karen, could you unmute yourself? Yes, please. Share with us your opinion.
It's easy to say it's unethical and that you shouldn't add them. And I agree that you shouldn't. But it's very easy to say, no, I won't add them. But it's, in fact, in practice, it's very difficult because once you say, no, I won't do it, that means you're out of a job. You're fired.
Yes.
Goodbye. So now it comes back to, is it ethical to lose wages? I don't know.
Yes. That's true. Maybe you have a commitment, you have a financial commitment, you have a family to support. If you're going against way the opposite way than your manager's instruction, you might get fired. So it's, where should I stand? What should I decide? I also agree with Karen. It's something we're gonna think about. I see Iyad also raising his hand. Iyad, can you share with us your opinion? Iyad, you can unmute yourself. Okay. Iyad? Okay. I would like to thank everyone for their contribution, and let's talk a little bit about this situation. Okay, we have as ethical, we have another example, we have another dilemma. So I would also ask everyone to join me in the second dilemma. For now, let's just reflect on this ethical dilemma. So in such a scenario, you're required to make a judgment call. Is this a common practice, or is it just the first time request? Does it put your department in an unfair advantage? Would you mind if other departments or other senior management find out what you have done? Would this decision affect your personal career, as Karen was sharing with us a while ago? Many questions about what to decide will come to your mind when you're in such an ethical dilemma. Here, I'd like to put this scenario in some kind of perspective. A corporate scandal can occur anytime there is an evidence of unethical behavior, negligence, or a third-party interference that impacts a company's reputation. And as you can see in this dilemma, the bad apple will do anything. And the biggest issue here is that one of the bad apples can ruin another, and we might lose the whole battle over time. So ethics will help us decide what's right and what's wrong. And the price, it comes with a price. As they say, everything comes with a price tag. Okay, moving forward to ethical dilemma number 2. I also I would like everyone to imagine they are the internal auditor. So as you can read in front of you on the screen, you are an internal auditor of one of the largest banks in the country. And during the audit engagement, you have discovered that one of the loan officers had approved number of loans related but separate, to many related but separate organizations in a clear violation to the regulatory policy. When you inquired about those specific loans, the loan officer indicated that that was an oversight and that wouldn't happen again. But you believe that his action was intentional, and it's something important in the fraud world. It was intentional because the loan officer is a direct relative of the internal audit manager, the CAE, the chief audit executive. So he's the direct relative of your manager, and you're the internal auditor. So what did you decide? The internal auditor, which is you decided to do the following. You decided not to inform the management about the conflict of interest. We're talking about the relationship. And you also decided not to report the violation for the regulatory requirements. And your final decision was to suggest no further investigation. Do you think you had made the best ethical decision? Let me add an additional layer. Here, you have personal financial obligations, you have family commitments, you have some illness in your family, and you cannot afford losing your job. Do you think this decision as not to inform of the conflict and not to report the violation and not to take the investigation further is an ethical decision, yes or no? I would like to hear everyone's opinion on that. It's an ethical dilemma, and it's something we face every day. We'll take Khaled. Khaled?
Hello, good evening. I would like to highlight that as internal auditor, responsibility and job would be jeopardized by not informing or reporting such an incident. Because if it was later discovered by one of the department's head, it would be also harming the job of the internal auditor and also his reputation. So I believe that he should refer to the disclosure of if the internal audit manager has disclosed to the management that he have relatives at work. Yeah. So if there is a policy of conflict of interest disclosure in the company, he can refer to it and then he can take
I
it.
totally agree. I totally agree with you. Thank you,
can take
Khaled, for your
from-
participation. I'll take one more participation just for time considerations. I would like to ask Maisa. Maisa, would you like to please join us and tell us
Yes.
what's your
Yes.
opinion on that?
Yeah, actually, I have a suggestion.
Yeah, please.
These questions related to an ethical dilemma. From psychology perspective, usually maybe you would like to make it a third person question to get more honest, answers. There is something they call the social desirability bias. So if you ask
Yes.
this question to someone directly, they will not give you an
Yes, yes.
honest.
I totally agree with you, and that's why I need you to wait a little bit with me, and you'll understand why I'm asking it from a first
Thank you.
from
Thank
a
you.
you, and it's not the other way. So just bear with me a little bit, and you'll get to understand why. Thank you so much for your intervention. Okay, for time considerations, thank you everyone who was willing to participate. We're gonna participate more in a while. Just please let me get back to the presentation. Okay, so we've got several opinions, and I thank everyone for their contributions. Let me conclude here this section. For many individuals, reading such scenarios, it feels so obvious. The answer is like, no, we need to take the ethical decision. But let me remind you that you are not in the shoes of the accounts receivable accountant in ethical dilemma 1, and you're not in the shoes of the internal auditor in ethical dilemma number 2. Each scenario might seem hypothetical, but still it's true, and it might be a real life scenario. And each one of us reacts differently to such an ethical dilemma. And you shall ask me why, Sultan? Why would this happen? Well, there are many reasons. As a while ago, there is a psychological, and there are many reasons I'm gonna mention right now. We have personal opinion. We have the person's position in the company. We have the personal financial consideration, the rationalization of that person, the personal intolerance towards ethical issues, and many other reasons, many other factors that plays a major role in our decision. Those scenarios are good examples of why all of us should study and understand the dynamics involved in the corporate culture and the ethical decision making. We need to look at things from a different angle and understand why each one of us in a certain scenario might take a decision that might be considered acceptable for him or herself and not acceptable in the eyes of many around us. Okay, to know more about what are the most common ethical issues corporations are facing in 2021, I would like to invite my colleague Eli to share with us some insights of a published research about this topic. Eli, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Sultan. Well, Sultan, we all agree that the occurrence and effects of corporate scandals within the last 20 years have led many boards to consider compliance more than performance. Nowadays, management are really taking practical measures focusing on reducing unethical practices and not just achieving profitability. According to the research that is here, the top ethical issues confronting corporations today revolve around sexual harassment, diversity, discrimination, social media, uh, manipulating business financial data to make a company look more successful, or what is known to be cooking the books. It's an accounting practices. This fraud is most commonly known from an accounting misconduct. Then we have the data privacy. As per the article, more than 80% of the Americans own smartphones, and the average person uses roughly 25 applications every month. So that's a ton of opportunities for data to fall into the wrong hands. And that is why we see lately companies like Apple, Google introducing measures and control related to data privacy and their new launched mobile and operating system. Speaking of that, we can always mention the story of Zomato case and how the breach of their data has led to an implementation of a global regulation known as GDPR, the Global Data Protection Report. And we can talk also about the nepotism. But when hiring someone based on your personal relationship with them and not on their ability to do the job. But even then, but even when they are qualified for the position, when hiring a friend or a family member can still present unacceptance among other employees. I would highly encourage everyone to read this article and learn about how to avoid and lower the ethical risk and to a controllable level. Maybe you can share the article later on our communication. Um, that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Thank you so much. Okay, moving forward, now it's story time. We're now in section 3. Here in section 3, we're going to highlight the VW scandal. As we mentioned earlier, one of my favorite corporate scandals that happened in the past 10 years. In my presentation, the scandal itself is divided into 2 chapters. In the first chapter, I'm gonna show you how VW evolved to become a multi-brand automobile alliance with a global production network. And then in chapter 2, I'll show you how a couple of bad apples destroyed the VW empire back in 2015. Okay, as you can see on the screen, we are sharing with you a timeline of building the VW empire. The Volkswagen Group is one of the largest companies in the world, responsible for some of the most recognizable brands we hear of every day and we see on the roads today. VW is the parent company of Seat, Skoda, Bentley, Bugatti, Lamborghini Man, and many other brands. As you can see on the screen, the VW was founded by the Nazi labor front in Wolfsburg, Germany back in 1937 and carried the name Volkswagen, which translates in English, the people's car. The VW empire started to grow over time and with acquiring more and more brands under its umbrella to become a real empire and steal the title of the world's largest car maker from Toyota. I'm talking about Toyota. So they have stolen the title of the world's largest car maker, as you can see on the screen, from Toyota in year 2015. But wait a little bit. That didn't live long, unfortunately. In September 2015, specifically, everything have changed. Volkswagen got exposed with a catastrophic emission cheating scandal that had destroyed the company's reputation around the world. So, what happened exactly? Volkswagen admitted in September 2015 that it had installed a defeat device in millions of its diesel-powered cars. Those devices had a software that detected when the car was being tested for compliance with emission rules. What engineers have done is that they made those installed softwares adjust the results of the emission test so that they pass, knowing that in real life use, the engines emits more pollution. We're talking about up to 50 times of nitrogen oxide, or what's known as NO pollutant, than what's allowed. Such pollutant will cause severe respiratory diseases like asthma and many others. And because of whom? It's because of bad apples. The software was installed in those cars with an intention to pass regulatory lab tests and make the cars look environmentally friendly. However, after the EPA, or what's known as the Environmental Protection Agency in the US, announced publicly the fraud, Volkswagen admitted the cheating emission tests. Okay, after the scandal had happened, what's the outcomes? Here we're gonna move to chapter 2. We're gonna see, because of those bad apples, what happened exactly. As you can see on the screen, VW's share value had dropped by more than 30% in one single day. Not to mention damages on different levels. I'm talking about damage on the business, where VW had booked more than 7.3 billion of its earnings as an anticipation to pay fines, litigation costs, and other payouts. On other level, damages for the shareholders, where the company, after 2 months from the scandal, had lost more than 46% of its value, which is estimated around $42.5 billion. We're also talking about damage on a reputational level, where the value of the VW brand has plunged after the scandal. Last but not least, I'm going to highlight also the damage on the employee level. The company announced that it will eliminate more than 30,000 jobs worldwide after the scandal came out. So, and also not to mention the number of cars they have recalled to fix and the catastrophic damage they caused to the planet and to the environment and even to the human health. So what are the lessons that we can learn from the VW scandal? Well, the VW scandal is only just one example of a very serious corporate misconduct occurring in multiple dimensions. And what makes this scandal specifically so special, it's intentional factor. It's because of those bad apples. The VW corporate leaders knew it was wrong, and they did it anyway. The senior engineers and the managers were involved in this fraud, and many of them knew about the deception, and yet they failed to take any kind of action. I know that the CEO and many manager executives have lost their jobs, but many others inside the VW were complicit. And that's what makes it dangerous. Those bad apples might ruin the whole barrel. Okay, to end here, I'd like to invite everyone to learn more about the scandal. There is an interesting Netflix original documentary called Dirty Money. In its first episode, they highlight the VW emission scandal in detail. I would like everyone to watch it. It's a very nice documentary. To end this section, I would also like to invite everyone to read Jack Ewing's book about which he talks about the Volkswagen scandal in details. It's called Faster, Higher, Farther. And I've chosen one interesting quote from this book. He said, "Not only did they cheat, but then they went out and crowed about how clean they were." It's really dramatic how I'm ending now this section, but it really shows how corporate ethics plays a major role, and it's very important. Eli,
Yes,
I'm
Sultan.
curious to know your opinion. What are your thoughts on the VW scandal after hearing all this?
Well, Sultan, it's not only about VW. And to answer your question, we can always mention big corporations that in time of crisis, they change their standard. For example, we can speak of an interesting article that was published in the New York Times back in March 2012, I think. It was titled by Why I Left Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs had a number one principle stating that our client interest always come first. This article was written by Greg Smith, who resigned from being, I think, the executive director and head of Goldman Sachs U.S. equity derivatives business in Europe and the Middle East and Africa. Greg joined the Goldman Sachs during summer 2000 as an idealistic 21 years old intern. And while this solely presents a young man's career in finance, it also documents a change in organizational culture in a premier American institution. I will not go into the details, but what got my attention is how Mr. Smith described Goldman Sachs culture. He literally described it as toxic and destructive. And he also described how during the crisis, the policy changed and how the company started selling junks to a long-term client just to make profit, regardless of their principle. I highly recommend you to read this article. It's very interesting, and it explains exactly what we're talking about. We should not forget the ethics in order to make profit. We should always consider ethics that comes first, our value, our corporate ethics, the tone at the top. And our existence is this is how we will continue to exist in as a company.
I totally agree with you, Ali. Thank you, Ali. Thank you for sharing the story. There is tons of corporate scandals, scandals that happened in the past couple of years, and even before that, that highlights the corporate ethics and the culture within the companies. Okay, thank you so much, Ali. Let's move forward to the last section of today's webinar. In our final part of today's webinar, we will be talking about solutions. Here we're going to talk about how we can create more resilient corporation against ethical misconduct. So at this point, we all agree that ethics is important and that it's a lifelong learning process, from nursery to elementary schools to higher education to our everyday job. And also, let me highlight that ethics competency does not depend on any kind of academic degree or specialization or any socioeconomic circumstances. Personally, I have met people over the past years who struggle to read and are financially vulnerable, and yet they are the most ethically thoughtful and inspiring people I've ever known. So ethics is accessible for everyone. Okay, now let's talk about solution, as we've mentioned, in its corporate context. What action steps can we take to create corporate resilience toward unethical behaviors in our corporations? First of all, it's the tone at the top. Okay, let me be clear. If your CEO does not embrace the importance of integrity and commit to both living to the company's code of ethics and corporate values and enforcing them, that's a big disaster. Hypocrisy is the enemy of integrity. And if the CEO and the entire executive team and the board members are known to break rules or enforcing them selectively, no one employee within the company will take ethics seriously. So the good tone at the top will definitely reduce the chances of employees committing fraud. And that by clearly communicating a zero tolerance attitude towards any type of frauds. Okay, how can management set the tone, set the right tone at the top? How can management set the right tone at the top? That's very easy. 3 simple steps. Communicate what's expected from your employees, lead by example, and reward integrity. As easy as this. Okay, moving to the next step, action step number 2, we're talking about creating an effective code of conduct. Here, corporations must have a specific published code of ethics that really reflects the company's core value, as well as the norms of its particular industry, the geographic location, the culture. From my experience, I can say that resilient corporation tends to view code of ethics or code of conduct as a process that creates value and not as a cost of doing business. And that's very important. You'll ask me, what should we include within the code of conduct? Because many of the codes that are there in our companies, there are parts that are missing. What topics should we include? We need to include topics like compliance with laws and regulations. We're talking about conflict of interest, general employee conduct, relationships with vendors, relationships with customers, favors, kickbacks, privacy and confidentiality, sexual harassment, fraud, and many other important topics. All such topics needs to be mentioned in our code of conduct. Our code of conduct is an important tool, but it needs to be it needs to include all the topics. How can we make it successful? Well, any code of conduct will likely encounter resistance, especially in cases if it's in the case where it is imposed on the employees. Nobody will like things that are imposed on them. So here it's very important to encourage a sense of employee ownership of the content when the code is developed. So what's advised is that to create this code in a collaborative environment and encourage input at all levels across the whole company. Moving forward to step number 3, we're not only talking about the tone at the top, and we're not talking about the tool as a code of conduct. It's about how to use it. So we need to create a safe reporting mechanism for the violation. Corporation needs to make sure that it is easy for employees when it comes to reporting any kind of ethical misconduct, corruption, fraud, or whatever incident. And here I would like to share with you a very interesting quote by James Morgan. He's the former CEO of Applied Materials. He had a nice motto that he always shares with the managers when he is visiting. He tells them, bad news is good news. Bad news is good news if you do something about it. So what he's trying to say is that if you hear of a problem or an issue, solve it as soon as possible, because at this point it is fixable. But if ignored and not addressed, the losses will be major and even more than what it is right now. So corporation needs to create a culture of integrity. Corporation needs to make the process of reporting as easy, straightforward, and clear as possible. Management can't just say, it is your job as employees to come to us and tell us what's happening. In the times, the reporting channels are full of barriers and restrictions. Okay, moving to the last action plan, we're talking about consequence. The code of conduct must be enforced and violations of the code should be taken seriously. Consequences is required. It might be simple as a warning for a first offense violation, but it can go up for a termination in more complicated violation. But it's very important to know that this consequence needs to be fair and reasonable to create this culture of integrity, where violators are held accountable for their actions. Why is it important for violators to be accountable? It is important because if employees never hear if any violator is not being held accountable, they will believe that the code is useless and it's not enforced enough, and with time, they will forget about it. So, to end the slide over here, those are only 4 main action steps that corporation might consider to create this corporate resilience I'm talking about. But there are more other actions. I'm talking about ethics training. I'm talking about implementing effective hotline and whistleblowing policy. We're talking about HR role in selecting a proper employees with proper background checks. We're talking about implementing ERMs, effective ERMs, enterprise risk management systems. We're talking about conducting fraud risk assessments from time to time, and many other actions that will definitely create the corporate resilience needed against ethical violations. To conclude today's webinar, I will ask everyone here one final question to think about it. And that's the only reason behind the webinar. It's not something educational. I just want to trigger your awareness towards ethics. And the question is, can you stop bad apples from spoiling the whole barrel? After what I've presented with you today in the webinar, the answer is yes. We can reduce the bad apples in our companies by providing good moral education, modeling moral behaviors, and creating communities that support doing the right thing. And stopping corporate misconduct is not only the job of corporate executives, it's also the job of policymakers, universities, educators, families, schools, everyone now watching on the go. We all have a role to play. As a final note, I would like to say that corporations need to work on understanding on the many aspects, the impact ethical decision of the ethical impact decision making. We need to consider all the factors I've mentioned in section 1. I'm talking about factors, religion, ethnicities, generation, gender, family dynamics, peer influences, emotional and physical characteristics, as one of our attendees have mentioned. There are many internal and external factors, because not every person views black and white, right and wrong the same. In fact, the policy of having ethical conduct alone is not enough to ensure that your employees will behave following the conduct. Corporation needs to understand and needs to continue understanding and needs to continue evaluating the corporate culture. And yes, I totally agree with you when you tell me that corporate greed, fraud, and deception are caused not only by top management, it is caused by everyone. It is caused from the leadership, on the leadership level. It is also caused on the followership level. It's not only happening because it's not only happening on an individual level, it's also happening on a community level. So what's needed, it's not a moral makeover at the top level. What's needed is an ethical climate. What's needed is an ethical climate change throughout the organization itself. We need a collective effort by everyone at all levels to create the culture of integrity. And before I end today's webinar, before we leave, as you can see on the screen, I'm sharing with you the acronyms of ethics. As you can see, I'm sharing a couple of phrases for each letter. So as you can see, E stands for everyone is responsible. T, tone at the top is essential. H, honesty is the best policy. I, integrity is the measure. Sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna go back. I, integrity is the measure of ethics. C, it seems we have a technical issue. Okay, so, excuse me. Okay, C stands for corporate social responsibility. S stands for silence is acceptance. So those are important phrases related to ethics. I need everyone to keep that in mind. It's very easy. You can take a screenshot and you can watch it again in the recording, hopefully when we upload it on the YouTube. Okay, at the end, I would like to thank everyone attending today. If you have any question, please reach out to us on our social media platforms for ACFE Lebanon. And there's my personal social media platforms. You can reach out to me. Once you leave today's webinar, you're gonna receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to the recording of today's webinar and a certificate of participation. And I would also like to invite you to listen my podcast. I have a podcast named or call under the title Let's Talk Fraud. It's a podcast where I share information and give listeners an insight to the world of fraud schemes, providing you with tips of how to prevent, detect, and take actions. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. Finally, on behalf of ACFE Lebanon, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sultan, for your very interesting ideas and how you presented this topic that we face each day in our life. And I hope that all of you, sorry, I hear my voice again. Okay. And I hope that all what we spoke about will help us in our future decision. I think we can now give some time to take some question or input from our audience. If anyone would like to share anything with us. Well,
okay, it seems everyone's okay. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Sultan.
Stay tuned for our future events. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you for joining on the
Very
call. Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sultan.